All right, we are on rehabilitation now. This will be the last chapter we cover this quarter. Okay, in this we're going to go over different rehabilitation programs. And one of the first things that's most important to understand with rehabilitation is just as there are different humans out there, different personalities, different things that people like and that they dislike, rehabilitation is kind of the same way. Different things work for different people. Different people commit different crimes for different reasons, and therefore there needs to be a variety of different programs in order to be able to help people out there, to rehabilitate them and to help them. And I mean, take for example yourself. If we were to use the analogy of different majors, different minors in college, different likes, dislikes. You're going to have people that like and dislike and are motivated by different things, and rehabilitation is no different. Let's look at some evaluation at first. As far as the what works argument. So in the 70s, Martinson found that with few and isolated exceptions, the rehabilitative efforts that had been reported up to that date really had no effect on recidivism. So people were they were going through these rehab programs and still committing crimes again. The foundation for this assessment was the examination of literature on rehabilitation appearing from the 40s through the late 60s. The effects of these programs on recidivism was negligible, and the outcome variables such as adjustment to prison, attitude adjustments, educational improvement did show some positive effects on offenders, which that was good. Subsequent analysis, the studies came to the same conclusion. The National Academy of Sciences said were reasonably accurate and fair in their appraisal of the rehabilitation literature, and the recent argument that some programs work for some individuals says the key in this, kind of like what I said before, is matching the subjects to the program. You need to pay attention to risk, need, responsivity, because it can have a significant impact on recidivism, which just makes sense. All right, the recent meta-analytical reviews state the basic positive findings on recidivism. There's a great deal of heterogeneity across the studies. Different types of treatment, again, have different types of effects, such as interpersonal skills, cognitive behavior interventions, multi-module approaches. Community-based programs typically have a greater impact. There were no uniform opinion regarding the effectiveness of rehabilitation, and disarray can be attributed to the underlying conceptual differences between opponents in the debates. Also, points of divergence are a choice of outcome measure and the level of evaluation. Okay, what is outcome measures? So it's the traditional measure of success is lowering recidivism. So that's what we're looking at. And it's defined in many ways. Reincarceration is a relatively rare, and simple contact with the police can greatly inflate the outcome. The most common outcome measures are those that do not look to recidivism, such as educational and vocational achievement, changes in self-esteem, attitudinal shifts, psychological adjustment, community adjustment, cost intervention, and that's huge. Maybe, criminals do recidivate, do go out and commit crimes again and do get arrested. But have you changed their educational level? Have you changed their self-esteem, their attitude, even how they parent? I mean, there's so many things you can change, but they may still be making mistakes. Maybe they're not to that level yet, but just because they may engage in recidivism doesn't mean that it's not working. All right, levels of education. So you have the aggregate level of education that looks at changes across large groups, and then you have the individual level of evaluations that focus on qualitative changes in the individual, something like we've discussed already. All right, the evaluation of those cognitive behavioral interventions show that target known predictors of deviant behavior and recidivism, and they target high-risk offenders in community settings. There's what we call multi-systemic therapy, or MST. There's been dynamic changes in this as far as their community-based intervention that attempt to address family, peer, school, community, and other influences, and they focus the needs of the individual. Continuing on with MST, the evaluations reveal reduced delinquency and improvements in risk-related behaviors, which is great. Then you have a cognitive thinking skills program that focuses on identifying cognitive deficits and inappropriate decision making. So why are we making the decisions we're making, and why are they ending us in trouble? Multi-model intervention that utilizes a range of techniques, and fewer treatment subjects recidivate than control clients. And then we have intensive supervision. So that's just features team supervision, high number of contacts between client and officer, curfew, house arrest, restitution, employment or school attendance, drug testing, those are UAs or urinalysis, community service, counseling, and treatment. And again, the evaluations present varying results. Restorative justice. This is a term that's utilized a lot, and you should understand what it is, because it is important in the criminal justice field, because it seeks to repair the harm that was done to both the victim and the community. The assumption is that the offender can benefit from this, and it brings together a range of interested parties in a non-confrontational setting, such as participants meet in a group and they seek to understand the actions that led them to the criminal or antisocial behavior, reveals the party, it takes an agreeable solution where they all have to assist in implementing the solution. There are 4 primary elements of restorative justice. You have the victim-offender mediation, you have family group conferencing, 3 is neighborhood reparative boards, and 4 is sentencing or peacemaking circles. All right, let's look at those. 4 different areas of restorative justice. So victim-offender mediation is where the victim and offender are brought together. There's a trained mediator. You want to identify for the offender the types of level and harm that the victim suffered, and the focus of the meetings is on repairing that harm that was done, restoring the community, and again, the outcome should be a mutually agreeable resolution. In your family group conferencing, it's based on practices of the Maori in New Zealand. It's the inclusion of family members, close friends, and other support groups of the victim. There's a facilitator who attempts to keep the discussions moving forward in a positive direction. You have family and support people have to take responsibility in helping to monitor the offender, and emphasis on engendering discussion among the parties about what took place, why it occurs, and the most appropriate steps to take forward. All right, third, you have the neighborhood reparative boards. They typically deal with nonviolent youth offenders. They seek to restore the victims and communities to pre-offense states, require the offender to make amends, aid the offender in understanding the impact that their crime had on the community. It is open to the public. Cases are referred to the boards by court. The board undertakes private deliberations as well and oversees the offender's compliance. And then we have peacemaking or sentencing circles. And I do have a presentation, not video led, but it's below this video on sentencing circles that you'll be going through this week as well. It's really interesting. It's based on North American Indian process. All the parties that are interested in it determine the appropriate sanction. Every participant is given the opportunity to speak and express their feelings. There's a great deal of planning and preparation that goes into it. The outcome of the circle is a consensus on a plan of action, and the decision is binding on the offender. All right, what impact do they have? So the evaluations of restorative justice focus on victim and offender satisfaction with the process. The level of compliance or completion of the agreed upon settlement. Both victim and offenders express satisfaction, and most meetings culminate in an agreement where the parties all comply. Little research on offender recidivism, and there is some evidence of reduced recidivism. All right, we also have drug courts because there are specialized courts out there. And the underlying philosophy is to use the court's authority to prompt participation in and successful completion of treatment. The coalition of prosecutors, police, POs, judges, treatment professionals, social service agencies, and other community groups. They operate in the pre and post education process. There's a lot of appearances in court, UA testing, urinalysis, treatment assessment, and there's over 2,000 drug courts in operation. There's mixed effectiveness again, just like we talked about in the beginning. They do recidivate at a significantly lower rate, but it does fail to consider those who do not complete at all. And many of the evaluations only measure recidivism during the program participation. There's also teen courts under specialized courts, and it's based on restorative justice, the 4 principles we just talked about. And it's really interesting because the youths act as a judge, attorney, jury. The offenses are like status offenses. That's an offense that only a juvenile can commit, such as being truant from school or curfew, misdemeanors, and occasionally low-level felonies. The impact is promising but not conclusive, and it's not intended to deal with your serious delinquency problems. Also, low budgets mean that teen courts are inexpensive. Then we have mental health courts. They seek to address the specialized needs of the mentally ill. Because we have an increasing number of mentally ill individuals arrested, right now we have more than 250 that specialize in juvenile mental health. The primary goal is to reduce the number of mentally ill individuals being handled by the criminal courts, because they should be handled by dealing with the mental health that's going on. Other goals are to enhance community safety, improve living, provide the needed treatment, and the prescribed drugs. The specialized court docket that marshals the expertise of mental health professionals, and it has really promising results. All right, assessing rehabilitation and crime prevention. So, again, I'm going back to what we talked about in the beginning. Interventions are all different. Some show results. It depends on a lot of factors. They've got to be multifaceted. The most promising at this time are the cognitive behavioral therapies and multidimensional interventions. And community resources are huge as well. All right, that ends this